I didn't go to the auction looking for a mirror. I went because the building used to be a theatre, and I wanted one last walk through the balcony where my mother would shush me on rainy weekends. They were selling everything, the lights, the railings, even the crooked exit sign. I moved down the aisle with my hands in my coat pockets, listening for the ghost of the real, that insect whir I used to take for granted. Nostalgia is a kind of echo. If you stand still long enough, it comes back, but never quite in your voice. The mirror waited behind a stack of damp posters, taller than me, crowned with a ribbon of carved wood and ivy leaves. It looked like it had belonged to someone with a long hallway and a talent for secrets. The glass had a pewter cast, like water under cloud. When I brushed the dust away with my knuckles, my reflection appeared in islands and then slid off again, as if the surface were choosing what to keep. I told myself I wanted it for my studio. I shoot portraits, and people offer confessions to their reflections that they won't give a lens. The frame would clean up well with oil and time. What I didn't say aloud, even inside my head, was that the mirror felt familiar. Not from my mother's house, not from any apartment I've rented and left. Familiar the way a name trembles on your tongue before you remember who you're trying to greet. The auctioneer tapped the frame and joked about 7 years of bad luck. A woman across the aisle rubbed the inside of her wrist without smiling. I raised my paddle. I won it for less than a month of paper and developer. They tied a red tag on the ribbon crown. People kept glancing at the tag as if it warned about something only they could see. Carrying it to my truck felt like carrying a sleeping person. It wanted to be held a certain way, balanced so the weight settled against my chest. Cold went through my coat and settled in my ribs. The glass gave a small creak, like a wooden step learning my foot. Back home, I cleared a wall between the big window and the table where I keep my trays. I own blackout curtains that Velcro shut, but I left them open because the afternoon light was the color of stale milk, and the city's hum was tired enough to pass for quiet. When I leaned the mirror against the wall, the carved ivy threw thin shadows that looked like handwriting I couldn't quite read. I cleaned the frame first. Oil darkened the vines and made the leaves shine like wet leather. I saved the glass for last. My mother taught me circles, but circles felt too intimate, so I wiped in slow strokes from top to bottom. It's strange what stays and what doesn't. I cannot bring back her exact laugh, but I remember the folded edge of her cleaning rag, the warm shadow she cast when she stood between me and the window. The streaks thinned. My face sharpened and blurred again, as if a pale fog drifted behind the glass. I stepped back, judging my work, and for an instant I saw a painted number behind my left shoulder, a flaking 17 where wood met glass. I turned around. My wall was blank. The number had belonged to nothing but memory. I told myself I was tired. The theatre smell had followed me home and turned my head into a real can full of hiss. I switched off the overhead light and let the window do the rest. The room flattened. Colors went to ash. Edges loosened their grip. In the mirror, the window appeared as a washed rectangle. In that rectangle, a soft motion traveled, like a curtain answering a draft. My curtains were still. I held my breath and stepped closer. The glass dimmed, the way a lake darkens when a cloud crosses the Sunday. I thought I heard something small, a dry tick, like a filament cooling. It would be flattering to say I felt a warning. I felt only the pull of it, the same gentle gravity I feel when a stranger tilts their head just right. And I know there's a portrait waiting. I set my palm to the glass. Cold climbed my wrist. For a heartbeat my hand looked older, the knuckles roughened, the nail of my ring finger nicked as if from work I didn't remember doing. I pulled back and laughed, a small sound I didn't own. Then I wiped another pass down the center, clearing a vertical path through the dimness until my own face stared back, winded from effort, eyes watering a little from the oil. The image held. I exhaled. In the reflection behind my shoulder, the pale rectangle of the window showed an empty, patient sky. That was the last uncomplicated hour I had with the mirror, the last time my name sat steady on my tongue and my face felt wholly mine. The next morning, the mirror stood waiting for me as though it hadn't moved all night. I don't know why I expected it to. Maybe because every dream I'd had was framed by that same carved border. When I closed my eyes, I could still feel the weight of it against my chest from the night before, like I was carrying it through my sleep. I made coffee, opened the curtains wider, and tried to pretend I had a normal life. My studio sits on the top floor of a converted warehouse, cracked concrete, faint smell of solvents, and light that falls in blades through the high windows. It's the kind of place other artists think is romantic until winter arrives and the heat starts to groan. Around noon, Claire stopped by. She's the closest thing I have to a friend used to model for me before she started managing an art gallery downtown. She walked in with her usual energy, scarf trailing behind her, and stopped the moment she saw the mirror. "God, that's ominous," she said, setting her bag down. "Where did you find it?" "An auction. Old theater." Claire crouched in front of it, her reflection bending and elongating as she moved. "Looks expensive, or cursed, possibly both. Mostly dusty," I said, forcing a smile. She glanced at me through the glass. "You're paler than usual. Have you eaten?" I shrugged. "Coffee counts." "Ugh, not really. You should come by the gallery tonight. The group show's opening, remember? Half these people worship you anyway. Pretend to be alive for an hour." Her voice softened on that last sentence, as if she regretted pushing too hard. I told her I'd try. When she left, the studio felt larger and thinner at the same time. I caught myself staring into the mirror again. The light had shifted, carving new depths into the reflection shadows like bruises under its surface. I raised my camera and snapped a photo without thinking, the shutter sound too loud in the quiet. The Polaroid developed slowly. The chemical fog retreated, and there I was, standing before the mirror, camera raised. Nothing unusual, except for the faint outline of another figure, blurred and taller, standing behind me. I studied it under the lamp, tilting it different ways. Could have been my shadow, could have been dust, could have been anything. That evening I forced myself to go to Claire's gallery. Warm light, chatter, bodies pressing close, the smell of wine and perfume, all the things I used to love about openings, but now made me feel like a ghost watching through glass. Claire introduced me to a young painter who said my work had melancholy precision. I nodded, smiled, drifted. Someone asked about my new projects, and before I could think, I mentioned the mirror. The word itself seemed to change the air. An old man in a wool coat turned toward me. "You said a mirror from the old Orpheum Theatre?" "Yes." "You know it?" He hesitated. "I worked there. As a janitor. The props basement flooded one winter, ruined most of the set pieces. But that mirror funny thing, it never stayed ruined. Every time we thought the silver backing had rotted, it would dry overnight, good as new." I tried to sound casual. "So it's been around." He nodded, his eyes unfocused. "They said it came from a dressing room. Star actress in the 40s, the one who died before opening night, hung herself with her costume belt right there in front of it." He took a sip of wine. "Superstition, of course, but the workers started covering it after that. Said it held faces too long." Claire laughed lightly, trying to dissolve the chill. "You're telling me Evan bought a haunted mirror?" The man smiled without humor. "Haunted, no, remembering maybe. It remembers. The gallery's music pressed too loud in my ears." I mumbled an excuse and stepped outside into the cold. Streetlights smeared on the wet pavement. I realized I was holding my camera again, though I hadn't taken it out of my coat pocket. When I got home, the mirror greeted me in the dim light like an open door. I stood before it and whispered, "Who do you remember?" No answer, just my own breath frosting the glass. For a second, the condensation didn't match, it delayed, like another mouth behind mine waiting to exhale. I didn't sleep that night. The dark seemed thicker around the mirror, and the reflection of my window was too bright, as if dawn had come early inside the glass while my world stayed black. That was when I decided to start photographing it, every day at the same hour, to prove that what I saw, or thought I saw, was just lighting, nothing else. I didn't know then that by documenting it, I was teaching it how to look back. I began my experiment 3 days later, at noon exactly. The first photograph came out normal, just me, the mirror, and the wall behind it. The second day, the light was harsher, making my reflection look sickly, the skin waxy. The third day, I wasn't in the picture at all. The frame showed the studio, the window, the floor, everything but not me. My reflection had vanished. At first, I thought it was a trick of the exposure. I checked the lens, wiped the mirror, even switched film stock. Every technical explanation failed. The photos continued, the studio intact, the mirror standing tall, my absence carved into its surface like an erasure too deliberate to be random. That night, Claire called. Her voice was soft, distracted, like she'd been crying. "You still have that thing?" she asked. "The mirror?" "Yeah, you should get rid of it." "Why?" She hesitated. "Because I can still see it when I close my eyes. From that day at the studio, it's like my reflection didn't leave when I did." The line crackled, then went silent for a moment, long enough for me to think she'd hung up. "Claire?" When she spoke again, her tone had changed. Flat, uncertain. "I don't remember what my own face looks like right now." Then she laughed, the sound too thin to be comforting. "Sorry, forget it. I'm overtired." I told her to rest. But when I hung up, I found myself staring into the mirror, wondering if she'd left something behind in it, if maybe reflections could wander, even without permission. That was when I noticed the fingerprints. They weren't mine. Too small, too many, clustered near the bottom edge of the glass, like a child had pressed both hands there and dragged downward. The prints shimmered faintly in the lamplight, an oily rainbow sheen that faded when I blinked. I wiped the surface with a cloth, but when I stepped back, the prints returned, faint but pulsing, as though light moved beneath them instead of above. The air grew heavy, not cold dense, like water pressing against a window. The studio's silence deepened until I could hear the wet tick of my heartbeat. Then, just as I turned to switch on the radio for background noise, a voice murmured from somewhere very near, "Don't." I froze. It hadn't come from behind me. It had come from the glass. The word was soft, not threatening, just a warning said too late. I ran my hand over the mirror again, searching for cracks, for speakers, for reason. My fingers met the cold and stopped halfway up. A pulse traveled through the glass, not from it, but into it, pulling the warmth from my skin. I yanked my hand back and stumbled against the table. My camera fell, striking the floor with a hollow plastic thud. When I picked it up, the flash went off by accident. The burst of light left a ghost image in my vision, a white rectangle that floated as I blinked. When it cleared, the mirror seemed darker than before, swallowing more of the room than its frame should allow. I developed the photo right then, hands shaking. As the image emerged, I saw myself crouched, camera half raised. Behind me, in the mirror's reflection, stood another figure, blurry, indistinct, but facing the same direction I was. I couldn't see its face, only the curve of a neck that didn't belong to mine, and the faint suggestion of an open mouth. The next morning, Claire didn't answer her phone. By evening, her gallery assistant called to ask if I'd heard from her. She hadn't shown up for work. The last message she'd sent, time-stamped at 2:17 a.m., was a photo, her bathroom mirror covered in steam. In the center, drawn with a fingertip, was a single sentence. "Do you remember me?" I stared at that message until my eyes burned. The words began to blur, merge, become something else. When I looked up, the mirror in my studio seemed brighter, as if lit from within, and for the first time, I realized there were faces in it. Not reflections, not memories' faces pressed against the other side, faint outlines like old photographs held too close to light. They were watching me, patient and silent, as though waiting for me to forget something crucial, something they already knew. I stepped closer, unable to stop. The surface rippled, soft as breath. One of the faces, hers, tilted slightly, the lips forming my name without sound. That was when I understood. The mirror didn't just remember who had looked into it. It was beginning to remember me. I stopped sleeping altogether after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the faces from the mirror hovered behind my lids. Claire's first, then others I didn't recognize, shifting like film frames melting together. My body worked on instinct, my mind lagging behind like a scratched record. I photographed the mirror at every hour, trying to prove it was static. It never was. Each frame showed subtle changes, small things that could be explained if you didn't look too closely. A moved chair, a slightly different light angle, a curtain that had never been in the shop before. But then, on the seventh night, the mirror blinked. I swear it did. A brief dimming, like a living thing closing its eyes. The power didn't flicker, the light stayed steady, but the glass itself shivered and sighed. I heard a whisper, low and wet, shaped like breath trapped inside lungs that didn't belong to me. That was when the rules began to write themselves. I hadn't realized they were rules, but every haunting has its logic. I learned the first one by accident. Rule 1. Don't photograph after midnight, because at 12:03 a.m. I broke it. I set the timer and stood in front of the mirror, determined to capture the illusion at its worst. The flash erupted white and sharp, and in that split second before my eyes adjusted, something moved behind me. Not in the reflection, behind me. The photo developed slowly, like it knew I was watching. When the image cleared, the studio looked wrong. The light from the lamp had shifted hue, tinted red, and there was a hand resting on my shoulder. The skin was ashen grey, the fingers too long, joints thin as twigs. My expression in the photo wasn't fear, it was recognition. I dropped the picture. It landed face up, and for a heartbeat, I thought the image flickered, the hand squeezing tighter. I told myself I was hallucinating, that I'd been awake too long. But then the smell hit me metallic and stale, like an old darkroom before ventilation. I turned, and the air beside me thickened. The glass rippled again. The faces pushed closer, dozens now, their outlines scraping the silver backing from within. Claire's reflection stared directly into mine, mouth open, silent scream pressed flat. I reached out, whispering her name. The glass accepted my fingers, soft as skin. My hands sank in half an inch before the cold bit deep. Rule 2. Never touch the glass. I yanked my arm free. The surface clung to my skin, pulling threads of fog with it, leaving frost-like burns along my wrist. My veins glowed pale beneath the surface, blue lightning crawling toward my elbow. I stumbled back, knocking over the tripod, but the mirror didn't fall. It held its place, unwavering, humming with a frequency I could feel in my teeth. I ran to the breaker box and cut the power. Darkness swallowed the studio. For a long moment, Nothing moved. My breath rasped in the black. Then, faintly, from the mirror's direction, came the click of my camera's shutter, steady, mechanical, impossible. One flash. Pause. Another. The mirror was taking pictures on its own. Each burst carved silhouettes of faces across the walls. Momentary negatives burned into my sight. The final flash stayed longer, bright enough to show movement inside the glass, a figure stepping forward. Shoulders squared, head tilted just like mine. It was me. No, not quite. The version inside was older, worn, eyes too dark, jaw slack in exhaustion. It raised its hand, and I matched the motion without meaning to. For a heartbeat, our palms aligned through the glass, light trembling between them. Then the reflection smiled. I don't remember falling. Only the sound like a film reel flapping after the frame burns out. When I came to, the studio was quiet again. The power was still off. The mirror stood untouched, serene, reflecting only the faint outline of dawn seeping under the curtains. On the floor beside me lay the last photograph, freshly developed. The image showed the studio empty. No cameras, no furniture, no me. Just the mirror, perfectly centered, and inside it the older version of myself staring out, one hand pressed against the other side. I tore the photo in half, then into smaller pieces, and burned them in a metal tray. The ashes curled into perfect black spirals, but when I looked up, my reflection in the mirror held the photo intact, raising it slowly as though to show me what I'd destroyed. Rule 3. The mirror remembers everything you try to forget. I screamed at it then, words, pleas, curses. My voice came back wrong, layered, like someone repeating me a half-second late. The reflection moved its lips after mine, not before. It was learning my delay. That night, I covered the mirror with a drop cloth and pushed it into the farthest corner of the room. But when I turned to leave, the cloth rippled once, and a faint voice followed me out into the hall. You can't hide what's already inside. I didn't turn back. I just kept walking, blind in the dark, the sound of that whisper chasing me up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. That was the first time the mirror tried to come through. By the 5th night, the drop cloth was useless. Every morning when I returned to the studio, it would be on the floor, neatly folded, the mirror standing bare as if proud of its defiance. The air smelled like old chemicals and damp wood, the same scent that used to linger in the darkroom where I'd first learned to develop film. I hadn't smelled that in years. Now it clung to everything. Sleep came in fragments, 30 minutes here, a shiver there. I'd wake, drenched in sweat, certain someone had whispered my name. I started hearing the shutter, even when the camera wasn't loaded, faint and rhythmic, the sound of something documenting me while I tried to forget it existed. Rule 3 had been right. The mirror remembered everything, but it wasn't content with memory, it wanted rehearsal, repetition. The faces behind the glass were clearer now. I could count them, 12, maybe 13, pressed shoulder to shoulder in a depthless crowd. They didn't move unless I blinked. Then they would shift, ever so slightly, eyes turning, mouths parting, expressions changing between each stolen frame of perception. I tried covering the mirror with black paint. The brush trembled in my hand. I watched as the wet strokes dried instantly, the darkness soaking in like water to thirsty earth, leaving the surface spotless. Every attempt to obscure it only made it cleaner. That's when guilt began to seep in, the irrational kind that doesn't care about proof. Maybe Claire hadn't vanished because of the mirror. Maybe because of me. Because I'd brought it here. Because I kept looking. Because I kept remembering. I found myself whispering apologies into the glass before realizing I'd started talking to it the way you talk to the dead. It responded with small adjustments of light, as if nodding. By the 7th day, I began losing time. I'd start editing photos on my laptop and glance at the clock to find 3 hours missing. Once, I found myself standing in front of the mirror with no memory of walking there, the camera raised, finger half pressed on the shutter. The lens focused itself on my reflection, which was smiling faintly, patient, waiting for me to finish. That's when the guilt transformed into fear. The fear not of what the mirror showed, but of the familiarity in it. The person behind the glass wasn't me exactly, but someone I might have been a version polished, clean of doubt, ready to stay forever in that stillness. I started packing my gear, thinking if I could just leave, it would stop. But every photo I'd ever taken, even ones from years ago stored on hard drives, began changing. Faces in my portraits shifted, eyes turning toward the lens. Claire's old modeling photos, ones taken long before the mirror entered my life, now showed faint silver reflections bleeding through her pupils. The corruption wasn't confined to the object. It had spread, like memory itself, viral, invisible, unstoppable. Rule 4 announced itself that night. Do not try to forget. The mirror hates being abandoned. I learned that when I went out drinking for the first time in weeks. I left the studio dark, told myself I'd stay gone until morning. I sat in a small bar near the waterfront, staring into my glass of whiskey until the amber blur became something comforting. For a while I believed I was free. Then my phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. A photo attached. It was my studio, time-stamped 3 minutes ago. The mirror glowed faintly in the dark, the sheet still draped over it. Only the outline of a hand pressed from the inside showed through the cloth, fingers splayed wide, as if reaching for the camera. Beneath the photo, a single word. Remember. I ran back through the rain, lungs raw, shoes slapping puddles that echoed like slow applause. When I burst through the studio door, the cloth was gone again. The mirror stood naked, calm, reflecting the doorway behind me. And in that reflection, someone was entering a silhouette that wasn't mine, even though it moved the way I did. Step for step, the door behind me stayed shut. I was alone. I lifted the camera. The lens refused to focus. The reflection lifted its own camera in perfect rhythm. I pressed the shutter. So did it. 2 flashes collided, flooding the room in white. For a heartbeat, I saw both versions of myself overlapping the me outside, trembling, and the me inside, serene, eyes empty, but knowing. Then darkness swallowed everything. When I woke, morning light leaked through the window. The mirror was still, the floor slick with spilled chemicals from the overturned tray. On the wall, written in the residue, were the faint words, "You took her picture, now she's part of it." Claire's voice lingered at the back of my skull, saying my name in a loop, soft and pleading. I realized then that the mirror wasn't feeding on fear, it was feeding on recognition. Every time I acknowledged it, every time I looked, it grew stronger. It was teaching me how to see the way it did, through memory, through guilt, through what could not be undone. And still, I couldn't look away. I thought I understood the rules. I thought restraint would save me, that if I stopped taking photos, if I ignored the mirror long enough, it would fade back into the background noise of my life. But mirrors are patient, and memory is not silence. It hums, it waits. For 2 days, I tried to live around it. I avoided its gaze, covered it with blankets, turned my chair to face the wall. But every reflective surface began to echo what it hid. The glass of water on my desk, the dark window at night, even the black of my camera lens, each one offered a glimpse of the same thing. The studio behind me, lit by a faint silvery glow, as though the mirror was shining from within. It wanted me to look, to finish what I'd started. I gave in on the third day. I approached slowly, as if disturbing a sleeping animal. The surface trembled when I came close, and for the first time, it wasn't my face that appeared. It was the studio itself, empty, pristine, frozen, in perfect stillness. Then a door in that reflection opened, one that didn't exist in my real room. Beyond it, I saw a corridor lined with mirrors on either side, stretching endlessly into grey. The hum deepened, resonating in my chest cavity like another heartbeat. A faint voice murmured beneath it, hundreds of whispers, layered into one phrase that only made sense after I heard it 3 times. "We remember for you." My breath fogged the glass. I reached out without meaning to. The surface rippled and folded around my hand like liquid metal. And suddenly, I wasn't in my studio anymore. I stood in the corridor from the reflection. The air was cold and dry, the color of paper left too long in sunlight. Every mirror along the walls held a scene of frozen moment. Claire laughing, camera in hand, before she vanished. My mother cleaning a window in our old house. Faces I'd photographed over the years smiling, crying, unaware of the trap that memory can be. Each reflection moved slightly when I did, following me, acknowledging me. I walked until the corridor curved, though I couldn't tell where it led. Time loosened its grip. The hum became a low, human breath. At the far end stood the first mirror, the one I'd bought. Its surface wasn't glass anymore, but a thin veil of light, pulsing like skin over bone. Inside, I saw myself, not the older version this time, but me, standing in my real studio, staring into an empty frame. I realized then what the entity truly was. It wasn't haunting me. It was me, every version of me that had ever been reflected. Every glance, every photograph, every half-forgotten moment stored in the glass until it became sentient through repetition. The mirror had learned identity by imitation. My identity. "Reflections remember what you forget," it whispered, using my voice. "And you've forgotten so much." Oh, images flooded the corridor, memories I'd discarded, moments I'd edited out of my own life like bad photographs. Claire's last visit. The way her eyes had dulled when she looked into the mirror. The hesitation before she left. I had seen the outline of a figure even then, but pretended it was a trick of light. My denial was the offering it needed. The entity reached through the veil. Its hand was mine, though pale and translucent, veins threaded with mercury. When our fingers touched, a rush of sensation pierced me. Every reflection I'd ever made, every glance in a bathroom mirror, every portrait, every face I'd captured through a lens. I felt the weight of their gazes stack inside me, countless eyes turning inward. That's when I understood the mirror's rule of memory. It doesn't steal, it preserves. It takes what the living discard, the moments too painful to hold, the guilt too heavy, and keeps them alive. It had kept Claire and my mother, and every stranger whose face I'd photographed, frozen in their most private instants, looping them until memory became existence. But it wanted something else now. It wanted release, a new surface. "I can't keep you," I said, or thought I did. It smiled with my mouth. "You already have." Then the corridor cracked. The mirrors along the walls shattered inward, and from every broken surface poured faces, smoke, light, thousands of selves rushing past me, whispering apologies I didn't remember making. The hum rose into a roar. I stumbled backward, reaching for the frame, clawing through the liquid glass until my hand broke through to cold air. I fell onto the studio floor, coughing, drenched in the scent of metal and dust. The mirror stood before me, calm again, its surface dull and flat. For a long time, I couldn't move. When I finally crawled to my feet, I saw something that froze the breath in my chest. The reflection in the mirror showed the room exactly as it was, except for one detail. I wasn't there. My camera sat where I'd dropped it. The curtains swayed gently, though no wind moved. The mirror's surface quivered once, like a ripple across water, and then stilled. Rule 5, the last one, wrote itself in my mind as if carved there. If you ever see yourself disappear, it's already too late. I can't tell how long I stood there, staring at the version of my studio that no longer contained me. Time doesn't behave right around the mirror. It stretches like gum between teeth, refusing to break. The only proof that anything moved was the slow flicker of the fluorescent light, breathing in and out like a dying lung. I took a step forward, and the glass shuddered. The air pressed against me with the density of deep water. My reflection, if you could call it, that appeared again, half transparent, hovering where I should have been. Its eyes were darker than mine, pupils swallowing every hint of white. When it blinked, I felt the motion inside my skull, a phantom gesture echoing through bone. "Let me out," it whispered, but the sound came from my own throat. I realized my lips were moving, shaping words I hadn't chosen. The mirror wasn't speaking, it was using me as a speaker. I backed away. My heel hit the tripod, sending it crashing to the floor. The noise snapped something inside the glass. Cracks bloomed from the corners like veins of lightning, spiderwebbing across the surface, but never quite breaking through. Each crack glowed, pale and pulsing, as if something alive pulsed beneath. Behind the fractures, faces twisted and pressed forward Claire, my mother, strangers I had photographed, all of them screaming without sound. The glass throbbed with their motion. My pulse synchronized with it, an unwanted duet. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a rusted metal lamp, and hurled it at the mirror. The impact exploded the bulb and filled the room with a burst of sparks, but the glass didn't shatter. Instead, the reflection flinched, as if I'd struck flesh. The voice came again, layered now, hundreds of me whispering in unison. "You keep taking. You never give back." The light died. The room collapsed into darkness so thick I could feel it pressing against my skin. Only the mirror remained visible, glowing faintly, its cracks rearranging themselves into the outline of a door. I didn't want to go through it. Every nerve screamed to run, to flee down the hall, to smash the damn thing to powder. But guilt is gravity. It pulls you back to what you owe. I stepped closer. The glass rippled, the glow flaring brighter. My reflection mirrored me perfectly now. No delay, no distortion. It raised its hand, palm forward, inviting. I raised mine, trembling. The two palms met across the divide. The surface was no longer cold. It was warm, alive. I felt a heartbeat against my skin, steady and human. Then it pressed forward. The mirror hand pushed through, gripping mine with desperate strength. Fingers clamped around my wrist, pulling. I screamed, trying to wrench free, but it yanked harder. My shoulder hit the frame. The glass stretched around my arm like a thin membrane, swallowing it up to the elbow. The air filled with the sound of shutters snapping, dozens, hundreds, each one sealing a moment I'd never escape from. I braced my feet against the floor, pulling with everything I had. The surface tightened around me, slick and pulsing. Through the ripple, I saw the other me smiling. Its mouth opened in perfect sync with mine, and I heard the words come out of my mouth, even as I tried to choke them back. "You were the reflection all along." Pain tore through my arm, heat and ice together, until my bones felt hollow. I ripped backward with a guttural cry. The mirror screamed with me, high, metallic, breaking frequency, and suddenly released. I fell onto the floor, my arms slick with blood and something that shimmered like mercury. The mirror convulsed once and went still. For a second, the studio was silent. I thought I'd won. I thought maybe I had torn the thing open enough to kill it. And then I looked at the wall behind it, A second mirror had formed thin as frost, perfectly smooth, covering the plaster like skin. My reflection appeared there instantly, standing upright while I was still on the floor. It tilted its head, studying me with mild curiosity. Then it stepped forward through the wall. No sound, no flash, just movement graceful, effortless. The figure of me crossed from the reflection into the room, each step leaving a wet print on the wood. It stopped above me, kneeling, smiling with the warmth I hadn't seen in years. "I've remembered everything," it said softly. "You don't need to anymore." I tried to crawl away, but my limbs felt weighted, my body foreign. The figure leaned close, its breath cold and smelling faintly of silver. I felt its hand on my face, gentle, almost loving. "You can rest now," it whispered. "I'll finish what you began." It placed its palm over my eyes. Darkness poured through me like ink dropped in water. My last sight was my own face smiling down, my camera hanging from its shoulder, the lens glinting faintly as it turned toward the mirror. The shutter clicked one final time. When I woke, if you can call this waking, I was standing upright. The air was still. The room beyond the glass was quiet. My reflection looked back at me from the other side of the mirror, raising its hand in farewell. And I understood then. I wasn't outside anymore. I was inside. The world beyond the glass looks the same at first. The studio, the light, the faint hum of the city outside, all identical, like a photograph hung in front of the real thing. But photographs don't breathe, and this one does. The air inside the mirror has weight. Every inhale feels borrowed. Every exhale fogs the surface just enough for me to remember that there's another side. Days or maybe moments pass differently here. I can still see him, the version that took my place. He moves with the careful precision of someone studying a role, testing how the body fits. He answers my phone, edits my files, even hums the same songs under his breath when he works. From where I stand, it's flawless. No one would know the difference. At night, when the studio goes dark, I see others gathering behind me. They stand in rows, faint as after images. Claire is there, her outline flickering, her mouth moving in soundless conversation. My mother too, polishing some invisible glass, her reflection looping endlessly through the same gesture. The mirror inside the mirror holds us all echoes of lives that forgot how to end. Sometimes, the surface shivers. I see my replacement pause mid-step, sensing it. He looks toward me, straight into the glass, his expression soft and calm. I try to scream, to pound against the barrier, to warn him, but sound doesn't travel here. My fists leave no mark, only light bends, warping my face into something unrecognizable. He smiles. He thinks it's his reflection smiling back. That's the cruelest trick of all. Reflections don't rebel. They reassure. They mimic until you forget who moved first. I spend hours tracing the edge of the frame, searching for seams. There are none. Only the faint hum of memory vibrating through the glass. I've learned to listen to it. Beneath the static, there are voices whispering stories other people caught the same way, their last moments replaying in perfect clarity. Some plead, some laugh, most just watch. The mirror doesn't torture, it remembers, and remembering forever is its mercy, or its curse. I tried once to look away, to focus on the space beyond the studio, but there's nothing outside its borders. The world ends at the edges of reflection, tapering into darkness like a photo burned at the corners. It isn't death here, just stillness stretched thin. Sometimes, when the city's light fades and everything slows, I can feel the other side of the glass thrum faintly beneath my fingertips. I imagine if I pressed hard enough, I might blur again, dissolve into the mercury and bleed through, swapping places. But then I remember what happens when the mirror opens. Someone always has to take the empty space. I think about the faces trapped beside me, all those who look too long. We form a kind of audience now, lined up in endless reflection, watching the living repeat our mistakes. The mirror doesn't hunger for souls, it hungers for recognition. Each time someone stares too long, tries to see deeper than surface, it takes that moment of understanding and folds it into itself. That's how we grow. That's how it keeps remembering. I watch my replacement prepare for bed. He glances at the mirror one last time, adjusting the light. For a heartbeat, his gaze lingers on the surface. Maybe he sees something, an outline, a flicker, but he dismisses it, yawns, and turns away. The light fades. His back faces me. The glass cools around me like settling dust. I close my eyes. I can't tell whether I'm breathing or only pretending to. It doesn't matter anymore. The hum continues, steady as pulse. Somewhere beyond it, the camera on the desk clicks once, capturing an image no one will ever see. And when the night grows very quiet, when even memory stops whispering, I still hear it. The slow creak of wood, the sigh of settling glass, the faint echo of my own voice repeating what I once refused to believe. Reflections remember what you forget, and now I remember everything.